My own children prevented me from saying goodbye to my husband at his funeral. A week later, when I arrived for the reading of the will, Julian looked at me with contempt and said, "This meeting is only for the heirs named in the will." His wife, Jessica, smiled mockingly beside him. Leo nodded from his chair, while Megan whispered something in her husband's ear. I said nothing. I just took a folder out of my purse and handed it to the lawyer in silence. When he opened it, my children turned as pale, as if they had seen a ghost. My name, Eleanor, was on every page as the sole heir. I am a 67-year-old woman who has just discovered that her own children are capable of betraying her in the most cruel way imaginable. I thought I knew Julian and Leo. I raised them with love, educated them, sacrificed my own dreams to give them everything they needed. I worked day and night to keep this family afloat after their father lost his job when they were teenagers. But on the day of my husband's funeral, the man who had been their father for 42 years, they treated me as if I were a stranger, as if I had no right to be there, as if 45 years of marriage meant nothing. Julian pushed me away from the coffin when I tried to say goodbye one last time. "You've had your moment, Mom," he told me coldly. Leo didn't even look at me when the tears began to roll down my cheeks. Their wives, Jessica and Megan, behaved even worse. Jessica went so far as to tell me I was making an unnecessary scene when I broke down seeing my husband's serene face. Megan simply shrugged and muttered, "Family drama isn't appropriate at a funeral." As if my pain were a performance, as if losing the love of my life were just an emotional whim. That night I returned to my empty house, feeling that I had lost not only my husband but also my children. But there was something they didn't know, something my husband and I had planned in secret during his last months of life, when he already sensed that his illness would soon overcome him. My husband had made 2 wills, a fake one that he left visible on his desk, where he divided everything between Julian and Leo, and a real one, kept in a safe that only I knew about, where he left everything to me. He had noticed the changes in our sons long before I did. He had seen how they treated me with less respect each year that passed. He had overheard their conversations about the inheritance when they thought we weren't nearby. "Eleanor," he told me one night as he took his medication, "our sons have changed. They are no longer the boys we raised with so much love. They have become ambitious and cruel. This will is to protect you when I'm gone." I didn't want to believe him then. I thought he was being too hard on them. How wrong I was. The week after the funeral was an emotional roller coaster. Julian called me exactly once to ask if I needed anything, but his tone was so cold and formal that I knew he was only fulfilling a social obligation. Leo didn't even bother to contact me. Their wives, of course, disappeared completely from my life, as if they had never been part of this family. When I received the call from the lawyer for the reading of the will, my heart raced. I knew the moment of truth had arrived. I knew my sons were in for the surprise of their lives. But I also knew that once I revealed the real will, there would be no going back. The relationship with them would be broken forever. I dressed in my best black suit, the same one I had worn to meet my husband's parents decades ago. I put on the pearl earrings he had given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look dignified, strong, imposing. I wanted my sons to remember this moment for the rest of their lives. I arrived at the lawyer's office 5 minutes before the scheduled time. Julian and Leo were already there with their wives, laughing and talking in low voices as if they were at a social gathering. When they saw me enter, their faces tensed slightly, but they didn't get up to greet me. Jessica looked me up and down with disdain. Megan pretended to check her phone to avoid eye contact. I sat in the chair farthest from them, feeling the tension fill the room like thick smoke. The lawyer, an older man named Mr. Albright, who had been my husband's friend for years, gave me a compassionate look before beginning with the legal protocols. "Before we begin," Julian said, interrupting the lawyer, "I want to clarify that this meeting is solely for the heirs mentioned in our father's will." He looked directly into my eyes as he added, "Mom, you can stay if you want, but this doesn't really concern you." Leo nodded with a smile that chilled my blood. Their wives exchanged satisfied glances, as if they had just won a battle. That was the moment I knew my husband had been right about everything. Our sons had become cruel and ambitious strangers. There was nothing left of the love and respect I had hoped for from them. They were no longer my boys. They were two adult men who saw their own mother as an obstacle to their greed. I took a deep breath and pulled the folder out of my purse. I placed it on the table calmly, without saying a word. Mr. Albright looked at me with curiosity but asked no questions. He knew there was more at play. My sons, on the other hand, didn't even notice my gesture. They were too busy mentally calculating how much money they were going to receive. "We will now proceed with the official reading," Mr. Albright announced, opening the envelope that Julian had given him the week before. He began to read the fake will in a clear, professional voice. "I, in full possession of my mental faculties, leave all my assets to my sons, Julian and Leo, in equal parts." Jessica squeezed her husband's hand with excitement. Megan smiled broadly. Leo leaned back in his chair with satisfaction. But then I raised my hand. "Excuse me, Mr. Albright," I said in a firm voice. "I believe there is a mistake. That is not my husband's valid will." I pushed the folder towards him. "This is the real document, certified and signed before a notary, just 3 months before his death." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Albright opened the folder with trembling hands. His eyes moved quickly from side to side as he read the first lines. Julian sat up abruptly in his chair. "What are you talking about, Mom? That will we just read is official. Dad showed it to us personally." "Your father showed you what he wanted you to see," I replied without losing my composure. "But the legal and binding will is this one, the one that has been in my hands since the day of his death." Mr. Albright continued reading, his face growing paler by the moment. Leo approached the desk, trying to see the documents over the lawyer's shoulder. "Mrs. Eleanor," Mr. Albright said finally, "this will is duly certified and dated. It is subsequent to the other document, therefore it nullifies any previous provisions." He cleared his throat before continuing. "According to this document, you inherit the entirety of your husband's assets. The house, the bank accounts, the investments, the life insurance, everything is in your name." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Julian stood up so violently that his chair fell backward. "That's impossible. Dad would never do something like that. You manipulated him in his final days." Jessica shouted something about undue influence and taking advantage of a sick man. Leo was paralyzed, his mouth open, unable to process what he had just heard. Megan was the first to regain her composure, but her voice trembled with rage when she spoke. "This is a scam. A woman your age doesn't know how to handle that much money. You're going to squander it all and leave us with nothing." Her comment about my age was like a slap in the face, as if my 67 years automatically made me mentally incompetent. "A scam?" I repeated, slowly rising from my chair. "You want to talk about scams? You want to talk about manipulating an elderly person?" My voice began to rise for the first time in the entire meeting. "You spent the last 2 years of your father's life pressuring him for money. Julian, how many times did you go to him for loans you never paid back?" Julian blushed, but maintained his defiant attitude. "That's different. We're his sons. We have a right to expect his support." Leo nodded vigorously. "Besides, Mom, let's be realistic. You've already lived your life. We have families to support, mortgages to pay, futures to build." His words hurt me more than I expected. "I've already lived my life?" I whispered. "Is that what you think of me? That I'm a useless old woman waiting to die?" Tears began to form in my eyes, but I held them back. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Jessica approached me with false compassion. "Eleanor, no one is saying you're useless, but you have to admit that managing such a large inheritance is complicated. We can help you. We can manage the money for you." Her smile was sweet, but her eyes shone with pure greed. "Like you managed the money I lent you last year for Leo's business?" I asked. "The money you never paid back? The money you spent on a vacation to Europe while I was eating canned soup to save money?" Leo looked down but didn't deny anything. His silence was a confession. Mr. Albright cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Eleanor, if you'll allow me to continue with the reading of the will, there are some additional provisions I must mention." I sat back down, discreetly wiping away the tears that had managed to escape. My sons remained standing, as if sitting down would be an admission of defeat. "Your husband also left a personal letter addressed to you," the lawyer continued, "and a statement explaining his reasons for this decision. He took a sealed envelope from the folder and handed it to me. My hands trembled slightly as I took it. It was my husband's handwriting, my name written with the affection of 4 decades together. Julian tried to take the letter from me. If it concerns the family, we have a right to hear it. This letter is for me, I said firmly, pulling it away. Your father was very clear about that. I opened the envelope carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure, and in a way it was. My dearest Eleanor, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means our sons have shown their true nature. For months, I have watched how they treat you with contempt and condescension. I have seen how they plan our future without considering you. That is why I have made this decision. I looked up at Julian and Leo. Their faces reflected a mixture of panic and fury. They knew that whatever that letter said, it would not be favorable to them. I continued reading in silence, but Jessica couldn't contain herself. Read it out loud. If we're going to be disinherited, we at least have a right to know why. Her voice was shrill, desperate. Megan immediately supported her. That's right, we deserve an explanation. I looked at Mr. Albright, who nodded slightly. I took a deep breath and began to read my late husband's words aloud. For months, I have watched how they treat you with contempt and condescension. Julian speaks to you as if you were a housekeeper. Leo acts as if your opinions have no value. Their wives see you as a nuisance they must tolerate. That's not true, Leo interrupted. We respect Mom. But his protest sounded hollow even to himself. I continued reading without paying him any mind. I have decided to leave you everything because you are the only person in this family who deserves my trust and respect. I continued reading my husband's letter. Our sons have forgotten the values we taught them. They have forgotten the sacrifice you made for them all these years. They love you only when they need something from you. Julian slammed his fist on the table. This is manipulation. Dad was sick, confused by the medication. But I knew the truth. My husband had been lucid until the very end. More lucid than our sons could imagine. He had seen what I had refused to see for years. Your father wrote this letter 3 days before he died, I said, closing the envelope. He was completely conscious. In fact, he asked me to read it in front of you if you ever questioned his decisions. I put the letter in my purse as if it were the most valuable thing I owned. And perhaps it was. Mr. Albright cleared his throat again. There is one more provision in the will that I must read. All eyes turned to him. The deceased specifies that if either of his sons attempts to contest this will or question their wife's mental capacity to manage the inheritance, they will automatically lose any right to receive the small monthly allowance he has left them. Small allowance? Megan asked, her voice barely audible. He left us something after all? The lawyer nodded and consulted his documents. He has left you each $500 a month for 2 years on the condition that you treat your mother with respect and do not interfere in her financial decisions. $500. After a lifetime of waiting for a millionaire inheritance, that was what they would receive. Jessica burst out laughing, but it was a hysterical, desperate laugh. $500? Is that what we're worth to him? To you? She pointed an accusing finger at me, as if I were responsible for my husband's decisions. You are worth exactly what you have shown you are worth, I replied calmly. For years I watched you treat your father like an ATM. I saw you eagerly waiting for him to die so you could inherit. Do you think he didn't notice your looks when he talked about going to the doctor? Do you think he didn't hear your conversations about how much time he had left? Leo slumped into his chair, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had lost. Mom, please, we can fix this. We can talk like a family. His voice sounded different now, almost pleading. But it was too late for please. Like a family? I said. When was the last time you treated me like family? When was the last time you invited me to dinner without asking for money first? When was the last time Jessica spoke to me without that condescending tone she uses with me? Jessica opened her mouth to protest but closed it immediately. She knew I was right. Julian tried a different approach. Okay, we admit we've made mistakes, but you're our mother. Blood is thicker than any resentment. We can start over. He approached me with his arms outstretched as if to hug me. I instinctively stepped back. Start over? I whispered. Like when we started over after you told me I was a burden when your father lost his job? Like when we started over after Leo told me I should move into a nursing home so I wouldn't be in your way? Like when we started over after your wives told me my advice was no longer needed because I belonged to another generation? Each question was like a slap in the face to them. I could see in their faces that they remembered every incident, every cruel moment they thought I had forgotten, but I remembered everything, every slight, every hurtful comment, every time they made me feel invisible in my own family. Megan stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. A woman your age can't handle that much money alone. You're going to be a victim of scammers. You're going to make bad financial decisions. You need our help. Her concern sounded fake, calculated. It was the last resort of someone watching a fortune slip away. My age again? I said, standing up as well. You know what? You're right. I am an older woman, but I am also a woman who worked for 40 years, who managed a household, who raised 2 children, who cared for a sick husband. If I could do all that, I think I can handle a bank account. Mr. Albright began to gather the documents, a sign that the meeting was officially over. Mrs. Eleanor, I will need you to come in tomorrow to sign some papers and transfer the accounts to your name. The process should be completed within a week. My sons exchanged desperate glances. They knew their last chance was slipping away. Julian approached one more time, this time with tears in his eyes. Mom, please, we are your family, your only family. Are you really going to abandon us for money? His tears might have worked before. They might have softened my heart if I had seen them a year ago, a month ago, even a week ago. But after the funeral, after how they treated me in the most painful moment of my life, those tears came too late. Abandon you for money? I said. You were the first ones to talk about money. You were the ones who treated me as if I were nothing more than an obstacle to your inheritance. I am only protecting what your father wanted me to protect, my dignity. Leo approached as well, flanking me with his brother. For a moment, I felt a pang of fear. They were 2 large men, and I was just an older woman. But Mr. Albright was still there, a witness to everything that was happening. They wouldn't dare do anything physical. Listen to us, Leo said in a hoarse voice. We can reach an agreement. We don't want all the money. We just want our fair share. We are his sons. We worked hard our whole lives waiting for this moment. His confession was more honest than he intended. It confirmed that their entire relationship with me had been a long-term investment. Your fair share? I asked. What is the fair share for a mother who gave you everything and received contempt in return? What is the fair share for a woman who sacrificed her own dreams to secure yours? My voice broke slightly, but I maintained my composure. Jessica, who had been quiet for the last few minutes, finally exploded. You are a selfish and vengeful old woman. That money should be for the next generations, not for you to waste on your senile whims. Her words were pure venom, designed to hurt me to the core. But this time, instead of hurting me, her insults strengthened me. They reminded me why my husband had made this decision. They reminded me why I had to stand firm. Thank you, Jessica, I said with a sad smile. You have just proven exactly why your husband will not inherit a single penny more than what his father decided to give him. I walked out of the lawyer's office with my head held high, but inside, my whole body was trembling. 45 years of marriage, 38 years of being a mother, and it had all ended in that room full of shouting and recriminations. My sons followed me to the street, their voices mingling in a desperate chorus of pleas and threats. Mom, this can't end like this, Julian yelled as I walked to my car. We're going to contest that will. We're going to prove that Dad wasn't in his right mind. Jessica supported him from behind, promising they would get the best lawyers in the country. Leo remained silent, but his silence was more threatening than his brother's shouts. I stopped by my car and turned to face them one last time. Do it, I said in a firm voice. Contest the will. But remember that your father was very clear. Any attempt to question his decisions will result in the complete loss of that small monthly allowance he left you. Megan turned pale when she heard this. $500 wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. That night, alone in my house, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since the funeral. I cried for my husband, for the family I thought I had, for the years lost trying to earn the love of children who only saw me as a source of money. But I also cried with relief. I was finally free from their expectations, from their constant demands, from their barely concealed contempt. The next day, I returned to Mr. Albright's office to complete the paperwork. The bank accounts, the investments, the house, everything officially passed into my name. When I saw the numbers on the bank statements, I almost fainted. My husband had been much more careful with money than I had imagined. He had saved, invested, and multiplied our resources for decades. It was a fortune that could last me the rest of my life and more. But it wasn't just the money that moved me. It was the freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to consult with anyone about my decisions. I didn't have to justify my expenses, my plans, my dreams. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, however I wanted. My first decision was to move. That house was full of painful memories, of tense conversations, of moments when I felt like a stranger in my own home. I hired a real estate agency and put the property up for sale. It was a large house in an exclusive neighborhood. It would sell quickly and for a lot of money. In the meantime, I temporarily checked into a luxury hotel in the city center. It was something I had never allowed myself before, but now I could. A room with an ocean view, room service, a spa, everything I wanted. For the first time in decades, I felt pampered, cared for, valued. It was in that hotel that I received the first desperate call from Julian. "Mom, we saw the house on real estate sites. Are you really going to sell the family home?" His voice was broken, as if he had finally understood that this was real, that it wasn't just a temporary tantrum on my part. "It's not the family home," I replied. "It's my house. Your father left it to me. I can do with it whatever I want." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could imagine him calculating how much the property was worth, how much money he was losing with each passing day. "Where are you going to live?" he finally asked. "Are you moving far away? How are we going to see you?" It was funny how he was now concerned about seeing me, when for years he had found excuses to avoid family visits. "I'm going to buy something smaller," I told him, "something that is truly mine, a place where I can be happy." I didn't tell him that I had already seen some beautiful condos with ocean views. I didn't tell him that I was considering moving to another city entirely. That information was none of his business. Leo called that same night, but with a different approach. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened. Maybe we were too hard on you. Maybe we didn't appreciate everything you did for us." His apology sounded rehearsed, calculated. He was the smarter brother, the one who understood that honey attracts more flies than vinegar. "Maybe," I said. "Leo, you treated me as if I were invisible for years. You made me feel like a burden in my own family. And now that there's money involved, maybe you were too hard?" His breathing quickened on the other end of the line. He knew I had seen through him. "It's not about the money," he lied. "It's because I realized we could lose you forever. You're our mother. We need you." But I no longer needed to be needed. For decades I had lived for others. I had existed to serve, to give, to sacrifice. Now I wanted to live for myself. The calls continued for days. Julian alternated between desperate pleas and veiled threats. Leo maintained his strategy of feigning repentance. Their wives also called, each with her own version of apologies that sounded hollow and late. But I had made a decision. It wasn't just about the money, though the money was important. It was about respect, dignity, the right to live my final years in peace. It was about breaking a pattern of emotional abuse that had lasted for far too long. A week after the will reading, as I was having breakfast on the hotel terrace watching the sunrise over the ocean, I received a notification on my phone. The house had been sold, for above the asking price. I now had enough money to buy whatever I wanted, go wherever I wanted, be whoever I wanted. I got up from the table and walked to the balcony. The salt air filled my lungs, and for the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. My sons thought they had lost an inheritance. I had gained my freedom. 3 weeks after selling the house, I moved into a beautiful oceanfront condo in an exclusive part of the city. It was modern, bright, with enormous windows that let in sunlight all day long. In the mornings I drank coffee watching the seagulls fly over the waves. In the afternoons I read on my terrace as the sun set on the horizon. It was the life I had always dreamed of but never dared to live. It was Brenda, my new neighbor, who told me about the luxury shopping center that had just opened near my new home. "You should go," she told me during one of our casual encounters in the lobby. "They have incredible stores and a lovely cafe on the second floor." I hadn't gone shopping for pleasure in years. It had always been utilitarian, quick, focused on necessities. I decided to treat myself. I dressed in an elegant red dress I had bought the week before, put on my best shoes, and went out to explore my new life. The shopping center was stunning, filled with stores I had previously only seen in magazines. I stopped in front of a jewelry store, admiring a pearl necklace that sparkled under the special lights. "Can I help you with anything?" the saleswoman asked with a professional smile. She was young, elegant, with that helpful attitude you only see in expensive shops. "I'm just looking," I replied, but she insisted on showing me several pieces. There were diamond earrings, gold bracelets, rings that cost more than many people's annual salary. I was trying on a particularly beautiful bracelet when I heard familiar voices near the entrance of the store. My heart raced before my mind fully processed what was happening. It was Jessica, talking loudly on the phone to someone, complaining bitterly about selfish women who don't think about the next generation. I turned slowly and saw her standing by a display of watches, gesturing dramatically as she spoke. She was wearing a cheap dress that tried to look elegant but failed miserably. Her shoes were worn, and her purse, though clean, showed obvious signs of overuse. It was clear she was having financial difficulties. "Yes, $500 a month," she was saying into the phone. "Can you believe the pettiness? A woman who has millions and gives us $500 as if we were beggars." She hadn't noticed my presence yet. She was too focused on her bitter conversation and endless complaints. The saleswoman asked if I wanted to take the bracelet. "Yes," I said without taking my eyes off Jessica. "And also those emerald earrings you showed me earlier." The total price was considerable, equivalent to several months of the average salary. But I paid without blinking. The sound of the transaction, the beep of the card machine, finally caught Jessica's attention. When she saw me, her face went through several different colors. First surprise, then embarrassment, and finally, a poorly concealed anger. She abruptly ended her phone call and walked towards me with a determined stride. "Eleanor," she said with a forcedly sweet voice, "what a surprise to find you here." "Hello, Jessica," I replied naturally, as if it were a normal, casual encounter. "I was just buying myself some gifts. It's amazing what a woman can do with her own money, isn't it?" My comment was deliberately pointed, designed to remind her exactly who was in control now. Her eyes immediately went to the jewelry store bags in my hands. I could see her mental calculations, trying to estimate how much I had spent, how much money I was wasting on luxuries she believed belonged to her. "It seems you're adjusting well to your new situation," she said with a forced smile. "Very well," I confirmed. "In fact, I've never felt better. I have a beautiful condo, I'm meeting new people, I'm enjoying things I never thought I could afford." Every word was a reminder of everything she had lost due to her greed and cruelty. Jessica tried to change her strategy. "You know, Eleanor, we've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we all overreacted because of the pain of losing. Well, you know, grief makes us say things we don't really mean." Her performance was pathetic, desperate, completely transparent. "Grief?" I said. "Is that what you call the way you treated me during my husband's funeral? Is grief what made you prevent me from saying goodbye to the man I loved for 45 years? My voice rose slightly, attracting the attention of other customers in the store. The saleswoman approached discreetly, asking if everything was all right. "Perfectly," I assured her. "Just a family conversation." But Jessica looked increasingly uncomfortable with the attention we were drawing. It was obvious she didn't want strangers to witness this conversation. "Maybe we could talk in private," she suggested, looking nervously at the other customers. "There's a cafe nearby where we could sit and talk like civilized people." It was funny how she now wanted to be civilized when for years she had been anything but with me. "I have nothing to talk to you about in private," I replied firmly. "If you have something to say to me, you can say it right here." My refusal visibly destabilized her. She was used to controlling situations, to manipulating conversations for her benefit. But now, I had the power. Fine, she said, taking a deep breath. I wanted to apologize. We all want to apologize. We know we were too hard on you, and we want to make it up to you in some way. Her apology came months too late, but I decided to hear what she had to offer. Make it up to me? I asked with genuine curiosity. How do you plan to make up for years of contempt and humiliation? How are you going to make up for the fact that you treated me as if I were invisible in my own family? Jessica swallowed hard. She clearly hadn't expected me to be so direct. We could start by including you more in family decisions, she offered weakly. We could have regular family dinners, celebrate birthdays together, be a real family again. It was almost comical how she thought I would want to be a part of her toxic version of a family again. A real family? I repeated with a bitter laugh. Jessica, a real family doesn't exclude the matriarch from the patriarch's funeral. A real family doesn't treat their elders like unwanted burdens. A real family doesn't eagerly await the death of their parents to inherit their money. Each word was like a slap to her. Her mask of false sweetness finally cracked. Fine, she said with a tense voice. Maybe we weren't perfect. But you weren't the perfect mother either. You were always too controlling, too critical. You never let us make our own decisions. It was typical of her to flip the situation and become the victim. Controlling? I asked. For working 2 jobs to support you when your father lost his? For sacrificing my own dreams to ensure you could go to college? For taking care of you when you were sick? For supporting you through every crisis? For always being there whenever you needed me? Jessica was speechless for a moment, but quickly regained her defensive attitude. That was years ago, Eleanor. Things change. Families evolve. You can't cling to the past forever. It was incredible how she minimized decades of sacrifice as if they were simple anecdotes from the past. You're right, I said with a calm that bewildered her. Families do evolve, and I have evolved too. I have evolved into a woman who no longer accepts being treated like trash by people who only value me when they need something. My words resonated in the silence of the jewelry store. At that moment, as if fate had orchestrated the perfect encounter, Julian appeared, running towards us. Clearly, Jessica had sent him a message when she saw me. He arrived flustered, sweaty, with that desperate look I had learned to recognize over the past few weeks. Mom, he panted, trying to catch his breath. Thank God we found you. We've been looking for you all over the city. His dramatic entrance drew even more attention from the other customers. An elderly lady with a cane stopped completely to watch the spectacle. You were looking for me? I asked, feigning surprise. Why? Am I suddenly important enough for you to look for me now? Julian exchanged a nervous glance with Jessica. It was obvious they had planned this conversation, but they didn't expect me to be so direct. Mom, please, Julian pleaded. We need to talk. Leo is waiting at the cafe upstairs. We can sort all this out as a family. It was curious how the word family kept appearing in their mouths now that money was involved. Leo is here too? I asked. What is this, a family ambush? My tone was light, almost amused, but inside I felt a mixture of sadness and anger. Even now, even after everything that had happened, they were still trying to manipulate me. It's not an ambush, Jessica lied. We just want to clear things up. We want you to know that we deeply regret what happened. We were hurting, confused by the loss. We weren't thinking clearly. Their excuses sounded rehearsed, as if they had practiced this speech several times. You know what? I said, picking up my shopping bags. You're right. Let's talk, but not in private. Let's talk right here, where everyone can hear. Jessica turned pale at the suggestion. Let's go to the cafe, she insisted. It will be more comfortable. No, I replied firmly. If you have something to say to me, you can say it here. After all, you had no problem humiliating me publicly at the funeral. Why do you want privacy now? Julian looked around desperately, noticing that several people were listening to our conversation. Fine, he sighed in defeat. Mom, we've been talking among ourselves, and we realized we made terrible mistakes. We let negative emotions get the best of us, and we hurt you deeply. His confession sounded sincere, but I knew my sons too well. What negative emotions exactly? I asked. Greed? Impatience for your father to die? Contempt for me, For being an older woman? Each question was like a dart aimed directly at the heart of their real motivations. Jessica tried to interrupt, but I silenced her with a look. No, let him speak. I want to hear exactly what those negative emotions were that led you to treat me the way you did. Julian shifted uncomfortably, clearly regretting having used that phrase. Maybe we were afraid, he admitted finally. Afraid that things would change, afraid of losing the stability we had always known. It was the most honest explanation I had heard from him in years, but it was still full of self-pity. Afraid of losing stability? I said. Julian, you are adult men with your own jobs and families. What stability depended on your father's death? My question left him speechless. He couldn't admit that his financial stability depended on an inheritance without confessing his greed. The tension in the jewelry store was palpable. Other customers were pretending to examine jewelry while clearly listening to every word of our conversation. The saleswoman kept herself busy rearranging displays, but it was obvious she was also tuned into the drama unfolding in her store. Look, Jessica said finally, maybe we could reach some kind of agreement. We're not asking for all the money, just a fair share. Something that acknowledges that we are also family, that we also have rights. Her proposal was pathetic in its transparency. A fair share? I asked. Your father already decided what your fair share was, $500 a month for 2 years. That was his conscious and informed decision. Julian winced at hearing the figure mentioned in public. But that's not enough to live on, he protested. We have expenses, responsibilities, families to support. His complaint revealed exactly what I suspected. They had been counting on the inheritance to solve their financial problems. Then work harder, I replied simply. Do what the rest of the world does. Work to earn a living instead of waiting for your parents to die to solve your financial problems. The stark reality of my words hit them like a bucket of cold water. At that moment, Leo arrived, clearly sent by Jessica, when she realized the conversation wasn't going according to her plans. He had Megan by the hand, both wearing calculatedly concerned expressions. It was like watching a poorly acted play where all the actors had forgotten their lines. Mom, Leo said with a trembling voice. They told us you were here. We've been so worried about you. Megan nodded vigorously, feigning a concern she had never shown before. It was almost insulting how little effort they put into appearing genuine. Worried? I asked. Why? Because I'm finally living my life the way I want to live it? Because for the first time in decades, I'm not available to solve your problems? My tone was calm, but my words cut like knives. It's not that, Megan lied. It's just that, well, a woman your age living alone, handling so much money, there are a lot of scammers out there who take advantage of older people. Her false concern for my well-being was so transparent it was comical. Like how you took advantage of me for years, I asked directly. Like how you asked for loans you never paid back? Like how you expected me to maintain your expenses while you saved for your own luxuries? Megan blushed, knowing that every accusation was true. Leo tried to take control of the situation. Mom, maybe we could go somewhere more private to talk. This isn't appropriate for a public place. But I was enjoying every moment of their discomfort. For years they had humiliated me in private. It was time for them to experience public shame. Not appropriate? I said. Like it wasn't appropriate for you to kick me out of my husband's funeral? Like it wasn't appropriate for you to tell me I had no right to be at the will reading? Each word resonated in the silence of the jewelry store, where other customers were now openly listening to the drama. Julian looked nervously around, noticing the faces watching us. People are listening, Mom, he muttered. Do you really want strangers to know about our family problems? His concern for public image was telling. Strangers? I asked loudly, addressing the other customers. You know what? These are my sons. I raised them with love. I gave them everything I had. I sacrificed my own dreams for them. And when their father died, they kicked me out of his funeral because they wanted to inherit faster. The expressions of shock on the onlookers' faces were immediate. Mom, stop! Leo shouted, but it was too late. The other customers began to murmur among themselves, clearly outraged by what they had just heard. An elderly lady approached me and put a comforting hand on my shoulder. Dear, she said in a gentle voice, I am so sorry for what you're going through, but I'm glad to see you're standing up for yourself. Her support strengthened me even more. For the first time in years, strangers were showing me more compassion than my own family. Jessica tried to do damage control. "There are misunderstandings," she said, addressing the onlookers. "Emotions are very high after a family loss." But her explanation sounded hollow after everything they had already heard. "There are no misunderstandings," I said clearly. "These are the facts. My sons kicked me out of my husband's funeral. They excluded me from the will reading. And now that they've discovered that I inherited everything, they suddenly want to be a loving family again." The brutal honesty of my statement left everyone in silence. A young couple who had been examining engagement rings came over. "Excuse me," the man said, "but what you're describing is terrible. Did your own sons really treat you like that?" His direct question put my sons in an impossible position. It's more complicated than that," Julian stammered. "There have been family tensions, misunderstandings," but his excuses sounded pathetic compared to my direct testimony. Leo tried to take my arm to pull me away from the growing audience. "Don't touch me," I said firmly, stepping away from him. "For years you touched me when it was convenient. You hugged me when you needed something. You kissed me when you wanted money. But when I really needed you, in the most painful moment of my life, you turned your backs on me." My voice broke slightly, but I maintained my composure. Megan made one last desperate attempt. "Eleanor, we all make mistakes, but family is forever. We can forgive and move on." Her plea was particularly hypocritical, coming from someone who had been one of the cruelest to me. "Family is forever?" I asked. "Where was that philosophy when you told me I had no right to say goodbye to my husband? Where was that family loyalty when you treated me as if I were a stranger at the funeral?" Megan had no answer for that. The jewelry store saleswoman approached discreetly. "Ma'am," she said in a low voice, "if you need to call security or if you feel uncomfortable, I can help you." Her offer moved me. A stranger was offering me more protection than my own children. "Thank you," I replied, "but I can handle this." I turned to my sons one last time. "You have 5 minutes to tell me exactly what you want. After that, I'm leaving, and I don't want to see you again unless it's absolutely necessary." My ultimatum took them by surprise. Leo took a deep breath. "We want a second chance," he finally said. "We want to prove that we can be better sons, that we can treat you with the respect you deserve." It was the first time he had admitted they hadn't respected me. "A second chance? For what? So you can inherit everything? To treat me well only because I'm rich now?" My question went straight to the heart of their true motivations. "It's not about the money," Julian lied, but his lie was so obvious that even the strangers present exchanged skeptical glances. "It's because we realized we need you, that family is the most important thing." "You need me?" I repeated with a bitter laugh. "You need me now? Where was that need when your father was dying and I needed emotional support? Where was it when I was left alone in that huge house, crying every night without any of you bothering to call?" My voice rose, charged with years of repressed pain. The audience that had formed around us murmured with indignation. An elderly lady came closer and said loudly, "You should be ashamed of yourselves. Treating your own mother like that is unforgivable." Other voices joined in, creating a chorus of disapproval that made my sons visibly cringe. Leo tried one last desperate strategy. He took out his phone and started showing me pictures. "Look, Mom," he said with a broken voice. "These are your grandchildren. They miss you. They ask about their grandmother constantly." The photos showed the children in their school activities, at birthday parties, in family moments where I was noticeably absent. "My grandchildren?" I asked, taking the phone to see the pictures better. "The same grandchildren who didn't invite me to their last birthday party because it would be too complicated? The grandchildren who don't even know my phone number because their parents never gave it to them?" I handed the phone back without showing any emotion. Megan began to cry, but her tears seemed more of frustration than genuine remorse. "We didn't know how to include you," she sobbed. "After Dad got sick, everything became so complicated. We didn't want to bother you with our problems." Her excuses were pathetic, and everyone present could see it. "You didn't want to bother me?" I asked incredulously. "But you did want to bother me by constantly asking for loans? You did want to bother me when you needed free childcare? You did want to bother me when you needed me to cook for your parties without paying me?" Each example I gave resonated with painful truth. Julian looked around the store, noticing how the other customers were looking at them with open disgust. "Please, Mom," he whispered. "People are recording with their phones. This could end up on social media." His concern for public image revealed his true priorities. "And that worries you?" I asked. "You're worried that people will find out how you treat your mother? Maybe you should have worried about that before you publicly humiliated me at the funeral." My response drew murmurs of approval from the onlookers. A young woman who had been recording came over. "Ma'am," she said, "your story is inspiring. Seeing a woman stand up for herself after so much abuse is powerful. Would you mind if I shared this on my social media? I think a lot of people need to hear your message." Her request took me by surprise. I looked at my sons, who turned pale at the possibility of their behavior going viral. "Go ahead," I told the young woman. "Let the whole world know how these men treated the woman who gave them life." Jessica practically fainted when she heard my permission. "You can't do that," Leo shouted. "That will ruin our reputations, our jobs, our social relationships." Their panic was delicious to watch. They were finally understanding the consequences of their actions. "Like you ruined my dignity?" I asked calmly. "Like you ruined the last moments I could have had with my husband? Like you ruined my right to grieve in peace?" Each question was a direct blow to their conscience, if they had any left. Julian made one last, desperate attempt. He knelt on the marble floor of the jewelry store, in front of all the onlookers. "Mom, please," he pleaded with tears in his eyes. "Forgive us. We'll do whatever it takes to make it up to you. We'll work for the rest of our lives to earn your forgiveness." His dramatic display drew even more attention, but I had made my decision long before this encounter. "Julian," I said in a firm but not cruel voice, "get up. Dignity is not recovered by kneeling when it's already too late. It's built by treating people well when it still matters." He slowly got up, defeated. "Listen to me carefully," I said, addressing all four of them one last time. "Your father made the right decision in his will. He saw what I refused to see for years, that you didn't love me, you only loved what I could give you. Now that you know the truth, we can stop pretending." The silence that followed was absolute. I took my shopping bags and walked towards the exit of the jewelry store. The onlookers parted respectfully, some applauding discreetly. At the door, I stopped and turned one last time. "You can keep that $500 a month," I said. "You're going to need it more than I do." And with those words, I closed that chapter of my life forever. 6 months after that encounter in the jewelry store, my life had completely changed. I moved to a coastal city, 3 hours away, where no one knew my family story and where I could simply be Eleanor, a 67-year-old woman who had decided to live for herself for the first time in decades. I bought a small but beautiful house with an ocean view, where every morning I had breakfast on my terrace listening to the sound of the waves. I adopted an orange cat whom I named Albright in honor of the lawyer who helped me reclaim my dignity. I enrolled in painting classes, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time. The video of my confrontation with my children went viral, as the young woman at the jewelry store had predicted. Millions of people saw it, and the comments were overwhelmingly supportive of me. Hundreds of older women shared their own stories of family abuse, ungrateful children, and years lost serving families who didn't value their sacrifices. The impact on my sons' reputations was devastating. Julian lost his job when the video reached his boss, who publicly stated that his company did not tolerate employees who mistreated the elderly. Leo had to close his small business when clients started canceling contracts after seeing how he treated his own mother. Jessica and Megan also faced social consequences. Their friend groups excluded them, their neighbors avoided them, and even at the supermarket, people recognized and pointed at them. The public shame they had feared so much materialized in the most painful way possible. They tried to contact me several times during those months. Phone calls I didn't answer, letters I returned unopened, emails I automatically blocked. They even went so far as to hire a lawyer to try to contest the will, but as Mr. Albright had warned, they automatically lost their small monthly allowance for that attempt. One afternoon, while I was painting a seascape in my new studio, I received an unexpected visit. It was Brenda, my former neighbor, who had driven 3 hours to see me. "I had to tell you," she said with excitement. Your sons showed up at the building last week, asking for your new address. What did you tell them? I asked without stopping my painting. I told them I had no idea where you were, Brenda replied with a conspiratorial smile. But I also told them that if they had ever truly loved their mother, they would leave her to live in peace. Her loyalty moved me deeply. She told me they looked haggard, that Jessica had aged years in just a few months, that Leo had lost weight and looked constantly nervous. Guilt is eating them alive, Brenda observed. But so is the financial loss. Apparently they're facing serious financial problems. Their financial problems didn't surprise me. For years they had lived beyond their means, counting on an inheritance they thought was a sure thing. Now they had to face the reality of their irresponsible financial decisions without the safety net they had taken for granted. A few days after Brenda's visit, while walking on the beach at sunset, I reflected on the journey I had taken. I had lost my sons, but I had gained my freedom. I had lost a dysfunctional family, but I had found inner peace. I had lost years of happiness, but I had regained my dignity. The money I inherited allowed me to live comfortably, but the most valuable thing I gained was self-respect. For the first time in my adult life, my decisions were my own. My time was my own. My future was my own. I didn't have to justify my expenses, my plans, my dreams to anyone. I established a small foundation to help older women facing family abuse or neglect. Every month, I donated part of my inheritance to support shelters, legal aid programs, and emotional support services. It was my way of transforming my pain into something positive for other women in similar situations. On quiet nights, sitting on my terrace with Albright purring on my lap, I sometimes thought of my sons, not with resentment, but with a serene sadness for what we could have had if they had chosen love over greed. But I had learned that I couldn't change other people. I could only change how I responded to them. One night, as I watched the stars reflect on the ocean, I wrote in my journal the words that would become my life's philosophy. I do not regret loving them. I only regret not understanding sooner that kindness should never be practiced at the cost of self-destruction. I learned that true love for others must begin with self-love, and that protecting my dignity was not an act of selfishness, but of survival. I closed the journal and smiled at the infinite horizon. At 67, I had finally learned to live for myself, and for the first time in decades, I was completely happy.